In southern Iraq lies the war-torn city of Basra. Once a cradle of ancient civilization, it is now scarred with crumbling walls and countless bomb craters of all sizes. Yet, amid this lifeless wasteland, a terrifying rumor has spread. American soldiers reportedly encountered attacks by reptilian humanoids here. Even more chilling, there are claims that an entire U.S. patrol squad vanished without a trace after making contact with these so-called lizard men. On a summer night in 2004, the air in Basra was so hot and heavy, it was almost impossible to breathe. After dusk, the ruins of the city were swallowed by thick darkness, with occasional flashes of firelight serving as grim reminders that this place had once been the epicenter of brutal battles. Dust, tar, and the stench of burning lingered in the air, pressing down over the entire area like an invisible shroud. That night, a 12-man U.S. patrol squad received orders to enter the southern ruins of the city to conduct a search mission and confirm whether insurgents were hiding there. The ruins had once been a residential neighborhood, but after the war, all that remained were collapsed floors, twisted steel bars, and blackened bullet holes. Before setting out, the soldiers checked their gear. Everything seemed normal, but once they arrived, the radio began to crackle with strange interference, a low hum that sounded like static electricity. Normally, such interference might come from crude enemy transmitters or old cables, but this sound carried an odd, unnatural rhythm, almost like the breathing of some living creature. Still, the squad didn't pay much attention. Inside the ruins, everything was unnervingly quiet. Normally, one would expect to hear the distant barking of dogs or the wind whistling through broken rebar, but that night it felt as though the entire world had held its breath. The only sounds were the crunch of boots on rubble and the heavy pounding of anxious hearts. The squad leader sensed the unease and lowered his voice, warning everyone to stay sharp. But just as they cautiously made their way through a bombed-out alley, a sudden noise broke the silence. Thud, thud. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed ahead, moving toward them from within the shadows. The soldiers froze, weapons raised, immediately assuming it must be an enemy ambush. But within moments, they realized something was wrong. The approaching footsteps had a steady, unnatural rhythm. Each step landed with the weight of a boulder dropping from the sky, sending faint vibrations through the ground. Nothing like the sound of a human walking. As confusion spread among the squad, a massive shadow slowly emerged from the depths of the ruins. "Holy shit!" one of the soldiers at the front muttered under his breath after seeing the figure through his night vision goggles. Even the blurred outline was enough to confirm it. This was no human. The creature stood at least 8 feet tall, far taller than any known enemy soldier. Its body was covered in dark greenish-black scales, reflecting an eerie glint under the green glow of night vision. Its head was long and reptilian, yet it walked upright. From its face, a pair of yellow-green eyes gleamed with a cold, predatory light, flickering like a beast zeroing in on its prey. Even more terrifying was the strange pressure that came with the creature's appearance. It wasn't something you felt with your eyes. It went straight into the nervous system, as if an invisible hand had clenched everyone's heart tight. The soldiers began breathing heavily, palms sweating, some even almost dropping their rifles. At that moment, the squad leader, worried for his men's safety, immediately gave the order to open fire. Gunshots instantly exploded across the ruins, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness as bullets ripped through the night air straight at the monster. The rounds seemed to hit their target, but the effect wasn't at all what they expected. Instead of dropping like a human would, the thing only seemed to get angrier, closing in with movements far faster than anyone thought possible. Even stranger, several soldiers suddenly heard a deep, guttural roar echoing inside their heads. The sound wasn't carried through the air. It burrowed directly into their brains like some kind of psychic noise, bringing with it stabbing headaches and waves of dizziness. Some clutched their helmets in agony and dropped to their knees. Others blacked out completely. In the chaos, the creature suddenly leapt, moving like a streak of shadow. Its claws carved 3 deep gashes into a concrete wall, scattering chunks of rubble in every direction. Gunfire still rattled, but the thing seemed to melt into the darkness, dodging with a speed that went beyond human perception. Within minutes, the patrol squad was in total collapse. By midnight, when headquarters tried to issue another command, The squad's radio was dead silent. So silent, it was as if they had been erased from the face of the earth. Realizing something catastrophic had happened, Command immediately dispatched reinforcements. But when they arrived, the ruins were quiet again. The 12 soldiers of the patrol squad were nowhere to be found. Only scattered weapons, broken helmets, and those claw marks on the concrete wall remained, as if silently declaring that something far beyond reason had taken place there. Soon after, U.S. military brass issued a statement claiming that Squad 7 was ambushed by enemy fighters during a patrol in southern Basra, and the entire unit was lost. No mention was made of any unknown creature. To the outside world, it looked like just another routine casualty report from the battlefield. But those who knew the details quickly realized something was off. The first problem was the unusual signs left behind. Normally, after a large-scale ambush, you'd expect to find piles of shell casings, heavy bloodstains, maybe even destroyed equipment. But according to one of the engineers sent to clean up the site, the place was eerily empty. The only real sign of fierce fighting was that single wall covered in claw marks. Each gouge was 2 or 3 centimeters deep and spaced so far apart that no human hands could have made them. Not long after, the engineer was warned by his superiors, "You didn't see anything." The second red flag was the missing bodies. The official report claimed the entire squad was wiped out. Yet according to the cleanup crew, no remains were ever found that matched the number of soldiers. Only 2 or 3 shredded vests and helmets were left behind, with barely any blood. Nowhere near enough to support the claim that all 12 men had died there. The most unsettling rumor came from the account of a transport soldier. On that night, he was suddenly assigned to help load something wrapped in a thick black plastic bag. The bag was huge, far larger than any human body, and even with several men lifting together, they could barely move it onto the truck. He noticed right away that the bulging shape under the plastic didn't resemble a human form at all. Instead, it looked more like the arched back of some kind of creature. He also remembered the sound it made as it was dragged up. Crack, crack. As if hard scales were scraping against each other. Not long after, that same soldier was transferred to the front lines and then disappeared completely. Some guessed he'd been killed in action, while others claimed he was forced to sign a secrecy agreement and vanished from public view forever. At the time, with war news being tightly controlled, none of this ever appeared in the media. To the outside world, Squad 7 had simply been ambushed by enemy fighters, and the transport soldier's transfer was just a normal reassignment. Everything seemed logical on the surface, but among soldiers, the story spread in a very different form. Some even began to suspect that the real reason the U.S. launched the Iraq War wasn't oil at all, but to search for ancient relics connected to the lizard people. That's because southern Iraq, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, is considered the cradle of the earliest human civilizations. Archaeologists have uncovered countless clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform, containing records about the origins of the universe, the arrival of gods, the Great Flood, and the rebirth of ancient civilizations. In some of those tablets, the Anunnaki weren't described as acting alone. They had followers, guardians, beings that were neither fully human nor beast. Some called them serpent men, others referred to them as lizard people. They were depicted as tall, bipedal creatures with scales and vertical pupilled eyes. Their role was to guard a source of knowledge, a source often described as a gateway to the realm of the gods. For decades, mainstream scholars dismissed these descriptions as symbolic myths. But in conspiracy theory circles, a dangerous belief persisted. These guardians and relics weren't fictional. They were real. Their traces had gone underground thousands of years ago, and in modern times, powerful nations have been trying to find them, even hoping to seize the mysterious technology they left behind. And Basra, Iraq, is said to be at the very heart of this ancient struggle. If you look closely at the details of the 2003 Iraq War, there are plenty of things that don't add up. For example, after U.S. forces occupied Iraq, their first targets weren't the oil fields, but museums and archaeological sites. The National Museum of Iraq in Baghdad was looted almost immediately after the war began. Countless priceless artifacts vanished. Strangely, most of the gold and fine art was left behind. What was stolen were tablets, statues, and cuneiform fragments tied to Sumerian and Akkadian mythology. Some surviving staff members later recalled that the raid looked less like looting and more like a premeditated, targeted search. The attackers knew exactly what they were looking for. They headed straight for the underground storage rooms and took items with special symbols linked to ancient civilizations. Among the stolen artifacts were fragments of tablets depicting lizard-like guardians. Echoing this, the US military deployed large forces to seal off the ruins in places like Basra and Ur, strictly forbidding archaeologists and journalists from getting close. Some soldiers even leaked that the military was secretly digging at certain sites during the night, hauling out massive sealed containers, with no one knowing what kind of hidden objects were inside. What makes it even more mysterious is that some retired US officers, speaking in anonymous interviews, admitted that during their missions in Iraq, they sometimes felt like they weren't fighting a war at all, but carrying out an archaeological operation. Their objectives often included locating underground entrances, mapping structures deep within the ruins, and even using advanced ground-penetrating radar to search for unnatural cavities. So, what exactly was the US military after? One theory is that they were trying to seize ancient technologies left behind in the ruins. If the Anunnaki really did leave behind relics more advanced than human civilization, then their energy systems, weapons, or even life sciences could completely reshape the balance of power. Whoever controlled such technology would essentially hold global dominance over the future. But there's another, far more terrifying theory. What they were searching for wasn't an object. It was life. Certain tablets clearly mentioned that the Anunnaki's followers were sealed underground in a state of slumber, only to awaken at a specific time through specific rituals. If these followers described on the tablets were actually the so-called lizard people, then their awakening could bring an unpredictable shock to the human world. Some of the US military's secret operations, it said, were aimed at finding these slumbering creatures. It sounds like absurd science fiction, but on the battlefield, soldiers' eyewitness accounts seem to back it up. They claim to see faint, scaled figures lurking in the shadows of the ruins and to hear deep, guttural growls during night patrols. Though US officials never confirmed such reports, the stories kept spreading, gaining more weight with each retelling. Imagine, if all of this were true, then the Iraq War wasn't fought over resources at all, but was instead a clash between civilizations and forbidden knowledge. Beneath the surface-level fire and smoke of war, the real struggle was whether humanity was ready to face those ancient guardians hidden away in the dust of history. Oil will run out, borders will change. But if these beings and their relics resurface, humanity's entire worldview will be shattered. Was the US driven by greed or by fear? Were they seeking to monopolize future technology or to prevent some ancient force from returning to Earth? To this day, no one can give a definite answer. But one thing is certain, the widely whispered warning from the ruins of Basra may be the closest thing to the truth. Do not disturb the slumbering guardians, or the whole world will be judged by them once more.